Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence.
All right, folks, welcome back to Conversations with the Mind for episode 60. I'm your host, as always, Shane LeMaster, and today we're here with a very special guest and returning guest, Michael Sullivan. How are you, sir?
Doing good, guys. Thank you.
So you were on the show last. I was actually looking it up right before we did this show, and you were episode 25. And so come a long way in about a year and some extra time, and I've interviewed quite a few people, and I always like coming back to some of the most interesting guests that some of my listeners have commented on, and you are one of those for sure. And specifically, I wanted to have you on the show today because I've been learning a lot about different perspectives on ethnic and cultural identity in my classes in my social work PhD, and you've always been somebody who I feel has been quite opinionated on those issues and able to, back up a lot of what you say with historical evidence. And that's one of my favorite reasons why I like talking to you, is because you always share so much history with me that really informs the information that I know about. So I really wanted to have you on today to provide some perspective for me and for anyone out there who might be interested in this topic as well. But yeah, just, kicking it off with ethnic and cultural identity. Like, what does that mean within the U.S. culture? And then what does it mean maybe on a broader sense, like among all humanity?
Hey, Shane, so I'm going to ask you if you can give me if we can narrow it down a little bit and give me an example of what you're looking for in this question, so I don't spin off topic.
Sure. Well, it is. You're right. It's a huge topic, but mostly what I'm reading about is things like oppression and injustices among different racial classes. And specifically what I've been reading that's been really interesting as I look into conducting my own research for my dissertation is I'm reading articles right now that are deconstructing almost this white middle class patriarchy that has dominated Western U.S. academic research, and it's kind of deconstructing that, not necessarily saying that the white man is a bad influence. I mean, there's a lot of innovation there, but that more there's definitely racial inequalities, and that different racial classes need to be represented on more equal basis. And then we see all sorts of racial division bullcrap all over the media all the time, trying to draw our attention away from really important issues, or maybe derailing us from what we should really be focusing on, equity and equality and stuff like that. So, yeah, I hope that narrowed it down a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And I guess this would be an opinion piece because I can't speak for fact of anything.
Oh, yeah. Neither are experts on this.
Right. I have an opinion that's very difficult to say out loud in today's environment. So as far as inequality goes, this always points back to Indo-European, Northern European males or females here in the U.S. And that seems to be the U.S. is the only place that this injustice happens and where UFOs land. And it's a little bit aggravating to me to be told that I'm the group that's doing this when I know a bunch of people. I know a lot of people, and I don't know anybody that wakes up on a Tuesday with this plan of putting somebody down. There is, of course, some people don't like other people for whatever their beliefs, their religion, their color. You're going to run into people that are simple that way. And I don't know how to pass a law saying that you can't be an asshole. And those people tend to isolate themselves pretty quickly, because I don't think the average intelligent person is really interested in getting tied up in this mess. So my belief, what is happening is if you take Black Americans, for example, I don't think that they're dumb, and I don't think they need our help. And that's an unpopular belief inside of the binary white guilt society. And it's been suggested that Black Americans can't get driver licenses on their own. They can't get voting cards on their own. They can't get to the voting polls on their own. And this is obviously nonsense. And I think like most Americans do, directly at them as equals. I run across plenty of Black people that are better at math than I am. And so when I'm working on something that requires math, I'll lean to the person that's the best in the room. But when all of these people get up in the morning and go to work and have their J, and they come home and they feed their kids, the fact that millions upon millions of them had a normal day and have good credit and have a mortgage and a house and a business, that's not making the news. It's the one or two guys that's making the news. And it's the heavy negative experience ones. And so it leads people to believe that this is just widespread, massive, and everywhere. And from my opinion, I don't believe many Americans, since that's what I can talk to, of any ethnicity or racial spectrum, really care to get involved in what's going on out there in the savior complex a lot of white people have, thinking that they're going to be able to save something by being outraged or being emotional. I just don't think it's beneficial. My personal opinion is, in my generation may have had something to do with this, maybe not. I believe it was largely my mother's generation that took us from a place where oppression was systemic. It was serious. And there were signs up saying that people couldn't go in certain places. And that generation eradicated it. Nobody told them they had to. Nobody went to white people that day and said, you had to do this. You have to mellow out. They had to do it themselves. And so whatever motivated them to do it themselves back in the mid and late 60s and 70s was a huge accomplishment, since it was self-policing in nature. And they raised my generation, and I don't see people racially in a negative light. I get confused on what people want sometimes. They want to be something special, but at the same time don't notice me. I'll see people for what they are, but if you get into it later on cultural identities, I have a real strong goal or hope where humanity goes with this, versus staying in this binary cultural appropriation. Everybody's afraid to talk, and it's not okay to be you, it's okay to be you culture that we have going on right now, which I think is counterproductive to any kind of unification and real serious future growth. So hopefully I didn't spin too far off on that one, and people got what I'm trying to put down there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we see the division most often in media. It seems like media, or even the White House itself, is sometimes pushing agendas which are, more divisive than unitary in nature, and pit different groups against each other, whether it's racial one week or has to do with abortion practices the next week or whatever. It just bounces from topic to topic. increasing the division. And I guess, what I was getting at with what I'm reading in these research articles about this deconstructing of white imperialism within research practices, largely a lot of these articles are written by white people or are written by committees that are multi-ethnic and include white people on them. So there is certainly some change from within, as far as I can, and I still struggle with this because I hear it all the time that white power needs to be taken down because the white people are still the majority, ethnic class. And I struggle with that because numbers wise, I think the Asian culture far outstrips Anglo-white numbers as far as global populations. So I struggle with that. But as far as white power, white dominance over the Western world and into other parts of the world, I do see a need to help, as someone who's aware of these issues, help to deconstruct that a little bit to make things more equal. Although, you bring up this white guilt society too, and I feel that for sure. In my social work program, there's only 8 of us in the entire program, and I'm the only white male in the whole program. The rest are female or ethnic minorities, things like that. And so they bring up the idea of white oppression quite a bit, and specifically white male oppression. And I'm the only one sitting there in class, and it almost feels like an attack at times, not to me directly, but I hear this echo from people who are informed and uninformed saying, it's your fault. The white men who live in this world right now in the U.S., it's your fault, and you need to do something about it. That's a lot of pressure that I feel like I don't necessarily deserve, because I didn't cause any of the oppression that you're referring to, slavery, things like that. I mean, I do.
Well, who's the slaves that they're referring to?
Who knows, over history in conquista.
Well, every single culture had slavery. So
yeah.
Are they only picking out a very tiny select section of history and then not going back any further? And then we stay on this one selection of history and say, well, we're going to focus on this 400-year period. And we're even going to get the flag wrong, because almost all American slavery was under the British flag. So we only had slavery in the U.S. for less than 100 years. I think 80 years, something like that. And then we, as a nation, through the Northern and Lincoln's movements, eradicated it through the Republican Party.
Right, but what about just white slavery over ethnic cultures worldwide, though?
Well, what about ethnic slavery over anybody else? How about people with guns enslaving people without guns?
Sure.
So are we only picking out people with pale skin and their slavery is bad? Or is the millions of slaves in Africa that are being enslaved by their own people, is that bad? That doesn't seem to be bad. Nobody seems to be upset.
Yeah, I mean, it is equally, if not more bad, because it's happening currently, but you're right, people aren't aware of stuff like that. They're only being fed this different narrative from within the country,
It's so when I hear people talk about white people this or black people that, listen, not all black people are going to make it into the NBA, right? I know black people I can jump higher than them, and I'm not going to the NBA. So most black guys and most white guys are not world leaders, and they're not empire creators. They didn't start out with nothing and create a massive empire, or start out with $1 million or $5 million and create billions of dollars. Most people, if you give them $5 million, will die in a cocaine overdose. So it's,
regardless of color or culture or whatever.
Right. Most people are not capable of doing big things. Now, the old model of doing big things, if we're gonna get mad at people today, like gosh darn you for the 1750s, I'm going to have to ask those people that are getting upset about this, and you have to go find a room to cry, because I can't do anything about it. Neither can you. And we can't find anybody that can do anything about this. But if we're going to look at the spectrum of slavery and holding people down, it went from these people have sharp sticks and those people don't have sharp sticks, and the sharp stick people held down those other people. We can keep going back and back and back. Even to the Barbary pirates that would pick up Caucasians in Europe on the beach and sell them off in Africa and the Middle East as slaves, which was a massive slave trade, but nobody cares. I don't care. It doesn't affect me today. It's unfortunate that it occurred.
Yeah, but you're not seeking reparations or any special treatment because that happened to your culture from a different culture.
Yeah, and it didn't even happen. Obviously, it didn't happen to my family, or I wouldn't be here. But there's a lot of confusion, we know, Bumpy, right?
I don't.
Okay, so he's a Thai boxer here in Denver, and he had told me I should be upset because Celts were slaves to Romans for somewhere in the neck of the woods of 800 years. And I said, boy, I just don't know if I have the energy to get upset about that. And he said, well, you should, because it held you down. I'm like, I think it was the best thing that happened to us. Honestly, if it wasn't for Roman intervention and everything, we wouldn't be here today. I'm pretty sure that my family wouldn't have made it. And the Roman intervention came in and stabilized Celtic communities and cultures. Even when they departed, we didn't know what else to be besides kind of Romanish when they left. So they stabilized Europe. Europe was a mess prior to that. And there's nothing uniquely awesome about the European brain over anybody else's. It was, the European structure was, I think, 100% primarily due to luck and resources and where they landed and Roman intervention. So it probably wasn't awesome for the 800,000 Celts killed in a single day off the River Rye by Caesar's legions. But overall, in the long run, we have integrated into society and have disappeared and no longer identify as Celts. And we are now just Americans or Irish or wherever we live. And it was that tribal disconnect that Europe had that made it not work in the first place, that the Romans came in and collectively fixed. So I'm not saying that the 12% of African slaves that ended up here in America was a good thing. But I'm pretty sure nobody wants to live in a country that's unstable in Africa. It's all a series of unfortunate events, and now people live in a country where they can do some stuff. And so it's what I just wanted to do stuff. Take advantage of what you have in front of you and do some stuff. But you've got some kids now, and I think it's only kids that are just screaming. And the thing is, they're not looking for an answer. They're just screaming. Mm-hmm. What do you want? Equality. Well, then go be equal to people. I don't know what to tell you, but I think most people are just trying to go to work tomorrow. So, and I don't think it gets any deeper than that. Everybody's just struggling to make their mortgage.
So you don't think that there's still an underlying structure of white ethnocentrism that still kind of rules over or governs over policy and opportunity and things like that in this country? I mean, most of our politicians are still, unfortunately, mostly white males, but I mean that we're transitioning to a more eclectic system right now, which I think is much more, much more beneficial in the longer term. But I mean, I don't know. Because I'm a white male, I'm constantly told that I will naturally have difficulty in recognizing that white oppressive, upper hand that everyone else is talking about, and I don't feel like I don't have, not intentionally anyway, any responsibility for undoing anything that I did or didn't do. You know what I mean?
Well, I would like to hear what the injustices is. I hear it sometimes, like periodically from, are you still capable of hearing me?
Oh yeah, we're still good.
Okay. From the Indian nations, like I find it real interesting here when people speak on Indians. I'm from Montana, outside of, we have Indian reservations, and we have interactions with the Indians all the time. But I find it interesting when people here throw down their opinions on that and on how bad it is for them. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll let them know how bad it is for them next time I see them. And I don't know if they're going to agree with you. The guys that I know that are Indians, they pay for their people's college education 100%, completely clean off the casinos, and own tons of land and have good farms and retire. And I don't know where these downtrodden, depressed people are. We have the option to do in this country for now, and it's getting less as we're getting more diversified. It's freedom's going away, in my opinion, incredibly fast.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I considered America I loved the freedoms we used to have. It was good, but now we're talking younger generation up to 65% is wanting to vote in either socialism or communism. And I'll be dead by the time that happens, but my kids won't, and their kids might not be, you know? So, you know, I told my kids, I'm like, if they vote in something like this, I don't want you to be a victim to it. Participate in the program, right? Get into the government and become the hammer that smashes the nails that all these people wanted smashed, and take from them everything that they wanted taken from them. But be on top when you do it. And that's my opinion. If these people want to be held down by voting in a government like that, I will certainly groom my family to be the hammer that they so desperately want to hit them. The freedoms issue, if we're talking about governing speech, I mean, right now what's affecting Americans isn't so much federal law or something of that nature being put into play, even though federal law in itself is a topic that's hard to wrap your head around with the amount of laws that are made per day. You can't even track it. But it's moved into like cultural law on what you can or can't say, or who you can be, or what you can wear, or it's okay to assault that guy because he offended me, but then you can't assault him ever, no matter what he does. And these weird things that are going on, I think, are hard for people to track. And I don't know that they're really mainstream, but people think they're mainstream, and they're not sure how to act. And I think it's causing people just to stay away from each other. And I think I do believe that this new trend of crazy, like the Liberal Party to me, the Conservative Party to me can be just like, oh my God, you're so square on your beliefs and shut off. But the Liberal Party is just like 10,000 individual pirate ships, and they all have their special crazy on each boat, and then we're supposed to vote for that. And I have a hard time voting for the group of men in women's lingerie trying to use a certain bathroom, and over here they want this special rights for this special feeling, and it's crazy to me when everybody's just trying to pay their mortgage.
So you're saying that with all the confusion out there, as far as like all the different wants and needs and perspectives coming from these different parties, for you and me, and for probably a lot of people, it just turns us off to even wanting to pay attention to what's happening. All the confusion, all the things going on, you don't know which thing to pay attention to, or which thing's truthful or not, or fake news or whatever. More people are likely to just back away and say, like, that's too much. I don't want to focus any amount of time or effort on that. So I'm going to go, just do my thing. And like you said, pay my mortgage, go to work, try and make things better for my family in this lifetime.
That's all I think is really happening. I can't relate to anything that they're saying on the left, and it's left me, and I'm a very middle of the road kind of guy. It's left me with no choice but to vote the other side because it seems less insane. And I had a Canadian friend get a hold of me the other day, and she said, what do you think of what Trump's doing with this letter that he sent? And I'm like, man, I don't have time to be outraged about this. I don't even know how you guys have time to be outraged about anything. Like, political outrage has been from day one. None of it affects anybody. Almost anything the federal government does really doesn't affect you. What affects you is your local government. And nobody even talks about what happens in Westminster or Broomfield's governments and what you are and aren't allowed to do based upon what that city's voting in, because nobody shows up. So it's really kind of almost a monarchy in those small towns, because nobody's showing up to represent themselves. They're only showing up for federal elections and getting wound up over letters the president wrote that, and none of the people that are getting wound up have a security clearance, so they don't have even a fraction of the information necessary to understand what's going on. Do you remember that there used to be a Budweiser commercial where it'd have a guy sitting at a bar talking crap about like Mike Tyson or something, and he's like, I could beat that guy with one hand tied behind my back, and the bartender goes, I'd like to see that. And so he smacks the beer on top of the TV, and the guy's in the ring with Tyson with one hand tied behind his back.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. When people say, here's what I think should happen, I'm like, bam, I'm going to put that beer on top of the TV and put you in there and just watch you make an ass out of yourself, because there's so much going on that there's no way these people, there's no way I understand it. There's no way anybody understands it unless they're in the mix. So I don't know the answer to this, man.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the bipartisan crap is the first step in how we need to probably move forward into a different system. Because, like you're mentioning socialism and communism before. And, I know that, I now know that you are against fundamental socialism or fundamental communism. But I also know that you're, a black belt and Sambo practitioner and have a deep respect and love for Russian culture and Russian people and things like that too. So there's got to be some part of you too that can see, maybe there might be some socialist elements that, if incorporated into this mixed pot of political theory and political action, some socialist things could be good. Some communist things maybe have worked for different cultures at different times and could be useful, at least in informing different political structures. But also, I think incorporating an eclectic viewpoint of like bringing in some capitalistic things, some Democratic, some Republican, some Green Party, all these little aspects. I don't tend to vote just for one party or the other, even though they make you identify as one or the other when you register. I tend to vote based on issue, not based on party. And unfortunately, sometimes if I'm voting for an issue, say I like socialized education, I think all basic university should be paid for by social means, as well as healthcare. But if I vote for the politician who's supporting those, then I also have to support him on all these other liberal things that I don't agree with them on. And so I think getting rid of this two-party system for sure, dismantling that, which who knows how we're going to do that, but then really having or educating people on what the issues really are, locally especially, but also federally and nationally, and get people to vote with their dollars and vote based on issue and ethic rather than on tribal party lines,
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm not one of those guys that believes in free medical care. I think almost all medical problems that people have in this country, the large bulk of them are lifestyle related.
Self-caused. Yep, most of them.
Yeah, and I don't want to have to work 15 more hours a week to cover that. And I don't think that everybody else that leads a good life should have to go to work harder to cover for that other person that doesn't want to pay. Somebody's got to pay for it. And these topics are spoken about almost in a magical way when the word free, and I think they just need to adjust their terminage. listen, we're going to do universal health care. We're going to force a certain group of people to pay for it. And if they don't, we're going to fucking put them in jail. There are slaves because they try hard and they have a little bit more money. And so we're going to imprison these people, and we're going to take their resources, which, by the way, isn't even going to come close to covering what's necessary. So what we're going to do is, if we change the wording and just said the truth instead of making us, because when you hand this over to a 18-year-old that doesn't have any drive and you go, would you like free school? Well, hell yeah, I'd like free school. Well, I'm assuming that the building's not sucking free power, and that it's not using free brick and mortar, and that it's not using free instructors, and it's not using free books, right? So where is this money coming from, and which group of people are we going to literally enslave to pay for this free stuff for somebody else? It's an archaic design.
Yeah, and as you were talking about it, you know, a new thought popped in my head and a possible idea. You know, with the healthcare piece, you know, and as a Buddhist, I believe that every human being should be entitled to at least basic healthcare to sustain life. I think our technology is at the point, and our resources worldwide are at a point where, if distributed properly, we could probably handle something like that. But I do also agree with your point that I don't want to be paying into systems that don't necessarily benefit me, whereas they're benefiting others who aren't paying into the system. So maybe a different type of not free healthcare, but stratified healthcare, whereas everyone's entitled to at least the bare minimum basic emergency care. But if you contribute to the system, whether it's through taxes financially or through work hours or volunteer hours, then you can get upgraded statuses for healthcare because you've paid into the system or contributed. You can get a differing level of healthcare. I don't know if that would be fair or not, but if it's based on work put into the system and not necessarily things that could be scrambled by things like race or culture, like earning ability or things like that, then I think it could be a more equitable system and provide much more people with needed health services. But I agree, people need to take personal accountability first and foremost for their health. I mean, you need to invest in yourself every single day in order to not have to draw from the system when you're older.
Yeah. I wonder if anything's really going to work until something that's not being talked about gets visited, and I believe that's the U.S. tort system. So you can sue a doctor over anything. Mm-hmm. And I went in for x-rays actually recently. They took x-rays of my neck and everything so we could see what the bone structure is looking like now after all these years of damage. And the doctor was just he looked at the x-rays and looked at me and goes, I can't help you.
Is that the same shoulder that you had the bone spurs?
Yeah, so the bone spur in my clavicle now, my clavicle is about the size of two hands put together, and it's growing into my chest. And I can't feel it because I've lost connection in my nerves in my neck, thankfully. So I'm mostly numb up here, and that's what allows me to move. And the bone spurs are growing around my neck, and they're all over my elbows. It's going to be a crazy final 10 years of life. But they don't want to deal with that. There's not much we can do with that. And I don't think it's society's problem to spend $1 million keeping me alive an additional 5 years. So I think everybody's got to die, but in time. But what I think goes on with medical pricing is because you can sue people, and you've got people in the country that make a living off just suing people. Because that's such an easy thing, medical prices have gotten so high and out of control that we're talking about enslaving a group of people to finance medical pricing that's out of control. It's the medical pricing. So I think doctors are worth the money that they charge for a visit, an office visit, for example, because they give you a peace of mind. But for the most part, the issues that people have, if it's not cancer or if it's not some kind of brain aneurysm, if it's a health-related thing, it really drops on the individual. And telling a person to go out and get in shape, and then the doctor can get sued because he told me to get in shape and I broke my Achilles walking. I think that there needs to be some kind of protection, because these doctors have to run such expensive insurance to protect themselves from the greatest victims of society in America, these poor people that don't have any coverage, which I guarantee are the ones that are doing this, that are a large part of that are doing this tort system stuff. I have very little experience in my life when for example, running the moving company, which is slightly off topic from doctors, obviously. But when I was working with middle class and upper middle class people, really, I can think of in a 10-year period, 3 issues that I've had. Almost every low-income person that we came across with their particle board garbage in their apartments filed lawsuits and tried to sue and created issues, refused to pay. They were nightmares. And so it got to be so predictable for me over this time that if somebody contacted my business and I said, how did you hear about us? And they said, out of the phone book, which means they didn't have a computer. I just hung up the phone. So, and we grew. When I started hanging up the phone on those people, the business grew. And it wasn't, and some people are like, but what about them? They're poor. And poor. It's not my responsibility to pick these people up. I don't have to be the whipping post. And I can barely hold my own head up. I don't need that. So I think it all comes back to the tort system and people suing people for nonsensical things in this country with no ramification. And I think if you sue somebody and you lose, your case is bogus, that you have to cover all their attorney's fees and time lost, and that would fix everything. I think that would drive prices right back down.
Yeah. But what do you think is underlying that? Because if so many more impoverished people are filing lawsuits and driving up these prices, the underlying cause of that behavior that they're displaying, that going out and seeking opportunity through these means, through the court systems, there's that underlying need that's not being met, and that is, that they can't, maybe they can't, actually, I don't know what the causes are, but, I can imagine maybe they feel they can't make money enough to support their family. It's better than selling drugs. It's, maybe it was taught, right? So there's this whole idea about generational education, things that parents pass on to the kids and say like, oh no, this is okay. Or, Aunt Charlotte is a millionaire now because of her operation that she got sued. And, we pass down this generational knowledge that maybe you can get a leg up if you step on somebody else to do it.
Yeah, we know scam artists exist all over, and I don't know that these people are the only people doing it. Did you know that it's in your gym, for example, if you're playing the radio, there's a group of representatives for attorneys that can come in. If they hear you playing the radio, they'll sue you, and they'll probably win for big numbers. You're not allowed to play the radio anywhere publicly, and it's considered to be abuse to the artists, and so you have to pay this particular group of attorneys, I think $700 or $800 a year to play the radio. So if you do it, you don't admit to it. And so they go around on this nonsense law that was made in 1921 and just sue the crap out of unsuspecting businesses and put them out of business. And then they make a lot of money. And then they're like, well, it's good. I made a lot of money. So we know that there's scam artists and there's assholes in every denomination. But as far as Aunt whatever did, sued her doctor, so now we can sue our doctor. I think the fix is making it that if you're wrong about what you're doing, you owe all this money to that other person. I think that would just clean up everything that's bogus before it even started.
Right, because then people would have to really consider, like, am I standing on enough evidence and enough ground to really make a case solid? Am I willing to take that risk? I see your point. You were also talking about, how people are entrapped in this slavery type system where, they may have to pay into a system to help support others. Right away, what came to my mind, because I'm dealing with it right now, is student loan debt. And I feel like through the pursuit of my dreams and my education, and I'm pursuing knowledge that is out there for everybody to get, and yet they put a price on it, and a really hefty price at that. I'm sure you're going to experience that soon with your boys getting to that age. But for me, like, I've incurred over $100,000 in student debt. And I feel as if I'm a slave to, the bill collectors and things like that because of my education. And luckily, I have a growth mindset. And so I see that education that I gained is invaluable and well worth that amount of money. And that it will make it easier for me to make that back. It still feels like unfair entrapment by an oppressive system.
Well, I think from my understanding, these prices went through the roof when the federal government got in the loaning business. And that allowed the colleges to start jacking up prices. And knowing that there's no way that you guys could get out of this, you can't file bankruptcy on it. So once the government gets involved and just starts throwing money at these campuses, there's no reason for them not to raise the cost of tuition, because you're going to get the loan and you're going to have to pay it back.
Yeah, even if you die, it goes to your kids.
Really?
Yep, student loan does.
Really? They get handed a bill, huh?
Yep.
It's nonsense. Yeah, so this kind of leads us back to where we kind of originated when you asked me what I thought, and I said I really like the freedoms that this country once had. And now I see it. It was the land of the home of the free, and the land of the free and home of the brave, right?
Right.
I kind of see it as the land of the fee and the home of the slave now. And I really believe that what you're talking about that student debt and the way it does turn you into not even an indentured servant, but a slave. I believe that young people in their drive to use a lack of information on what could make things better are going to work very hard to change and experiment with the lives of other people and make things much worse. I hate doing social experiments on living people with information that you don't know for sure is going to work. We've done pretty well as a country when the government stayed out of business and stayed out of stuff. But now people really want the government, which is just a group of people with an agenda. And that agenda is to make sure that they have their money. And so they have a metaphorical gun in everybody's mouth, making sure they're getting their money so they can grow and they can have their paychecks and their high benefits and their good incomes. But everybody else is just here to supply that. And I feel like people are super excited about being a slave to that and are voting that in more and more and more. To where the only thing that matters right now, and you're going to have a hard time disagreeing with this if you think about it, I believe, is the only thing that really matters right now in America is government employees. That's it.
You mean the only thing that matters to what? To people?
To people. Yeah, they don't even realize this. The right side, they're like, oh, our soldiers and our military. That's government employees. And then the left is like, oh, our social stuff and our
social programs.
Yeah, programs, right? It's all government stuff. But you know, what happened to the regular guy in this? The regular guy in this is not being represented anymore. He's just an indentured servant. You're a slave for $100,000, and you're not going to be cut free until you pay that off. And if we keep voting this stuff in this way, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And luckily, I'm not going to be around for it.
So
I only have 25 more years of life, right?
Hopefully a little bit more.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. That'll put me out there at about that time, and I don't think I need to go any further than that. But I'm looking at 25 more years. So things are a little different to me in my head when you put a timer on it. I'm like, ooh, I better focus on what's important, or I'm going to leave here just having had a bunch of emotions and opinions, and I need to get some results done so my kids don't have to live struggling like I did.
Yeah, and that brings me to my next, question for you is this idea of generational education. I know that you are a strong proponent and very active in educating your two boys about life and about what the truths of life is going to be like. And you don't sugarcoat it for them, but you're preparing them very well for the realities of current culture. And I feel like a lot of parents out there are already misinformed, and because of their misinformation, they're passing down this misinformation to their kids and further perpetuating this ignorance and these cycles of, it's like that movie Idiocracy, where people just get dumber over time because it's the dumb people who are just having all the kids and stuff like that. It's kind of hilarious to think about today, but can you speak to that as far as like generational education, what that means to you and what trends you see going on, what's going wrong with the education of our kids from the parents, not necessarily from the education system?
Well, so we're talking a culture now, and I spent some time in Holland some while ago, and Trump had just been elected into office when I was over there, and most of the Dutch people are just really cool and they didn't really bother with it. But some of the people that didn't know me, I was in a locker room with this martial arts gym, Taboga Martial Arts Kickboxing Club, and guy walks in and he says hello, right? And so I said hi, and he goes, "Oh, you're." People thought I was English first over there. Their initial impact on me, looking at me, they thought that I was English, and my response was like, "No, I'm not." It's like, what do you mean I don't look English? And,
well, maybe they thought that Americans should be like fat and loud or something.
No, they didn't think anything like that. It turns out when I went over to England, I went into London, and nobody looked like me in London. Like London's almost dead. It's almost in ruins. It's just a bunch of deteriorating buildings, and it's a ton of mosques, and London's not England anymore. So we left London and we went further north up next to Hadrian's Wall. And I got out of the car and I was like, this is why they think I'm English. I look exactly like everybody here. So it made sense there, but they had these preconceived concepts in their head of what I was. And they even, with a buddy of mine that I met over there that was Irish, they said, "Hey, there's another American here. He's a door maker. Do you want to meet him?" I'm like, "Yes, that'd be sweet." And so the guy's walking across this open plaza, and he's walking over, and I looked at Amy and I'm like, "That's not an American. That's not an American guy." And he got up close and he turned out to be Irish. And he goes, "I don't know why they think I'm American. They think I'm American, right?" So there's some confusion in the Dutch mind about what we are and everybody else is, just like we have confusion about what everybody else is. Correct?
Correct.
So what these people said to me in the locker room, they go, "Well, what do you think of your president?" And I said, "I don't know. He just got voted in." And he goes, "Do you think he's going to do a good job?" I'm like, "Man," it was like, I don't know the guy. I have no idea who the guy is, and we're not going to get wound up. They were in the middle of their elections too, and they all wanted more socialism. And they said that to me in those words. I'm like, "You guys want more socialism?" And they go, yes, more socialism. And it was interesting to hear this because a lot of the people that were telling me this were speaking over people that were having a hard time moving up in the world because of it. And Maddie's a friend of mine that lives there, works in a similar field that you work in, except he has to live with his mom, and he will have to live with his mother until his probably 40s in order to purchase a house. Apparently moving up in that culture is almost impossible. And another friend of mine that lives over there is a tax attorney for defending people from their IRS model. And he says that their IRS is like ours, and it's like he says they're fucking gangsters, and they'll tear you down. And I don't know how somebody would want more of that, but culturally that's what they wanted because that's what they knew. And so apparently the only fix would be more of it. That was my opinion. So when we come to learning from families over here in the States and hearing people say, hey, let's take Holland's medical program because your medical is 100% free over there, and it's free because you paid 65% of your income into it, and then you pay 50% of the bill. You pay 65% of your income, I believe, and then you pay 50% of the bill. That's what they mean by free. So if we're going to redefine words, that's free, which sounds super expensive to me, but that's free. So when we're talking these cultures of what people understand and they teach their kids, and so the Hollanders are like, the Dutch are like, why don't you do this over in America? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Why don't you come to America and show us how it's done? Why don't you go across the inner city of Chicago and then come over in here to Broomfield and use the same message to get across what you're trying to do, and see if you can culturally connect to both groups of people, and see how you can make crackers in northern and southern Florida agree with the people up in inner city Chicago. And if you can get the people in Kentucky and in coal mines to get on board with the Boulderites hippies. I don't know how you're going to do this. This country is so massive, and it's filled with all these little cults of mentality. I don't understand how we can unify that. So inside of that, if you come from, the dating world was always very tricky. And I think a lot of the times people don't mix because you sit down on that first date, for example, and you just start having a conversation. You can tell that you guys don't have anything in common, right? We've all been there.
Right.
So that same issue that I just used for an example of dating, that's going to transfer into everything else. We don't have anything in common, and we're trying to unify.
Well, we do all have consciousness in common in that we are all experiencing it in this plane of existence together. I think that that concept around spirituality and not religion and not different traditions, necessarily, but that ultimate underlying quest for understanding our purpose and our position among the cosmos. I think we all share that, regardless of culture or race or gender or identity issue. That thing transcends it all. If we can all get on like the same page around that could be unifying.
So first of all, I think that Buddhism in its modern form has out-evolved the human species.
For sure.
And so, yes, I agree. And so that would take me to a real quick snap over. Would I agree to socialism if we could all agree that we're, as a community, as an entire globe, we're going to move into a Star Trek type world, and we're going to move on to Mars, and we're going to do this stuff, and we're going to try to do things right? Yeah, I'm in on it. I'll be the guy that puts the wood trim on the bottom of on the carpet in the spaceship, right? I don't even know if I'm qualified to be a janitor in a spaceship, but I'll do what I can in that. But But that's not what's happening. Everything is about, I want to get mine. That's how people think, right? And the poorer they get, the more I want to get mine is. And I believe the greedier they become, which leads to less prosperity.
Sure. And I think the root of that, I got to get mine, is this idea that you are separate from me. You know, if we can, again, unify, and I obviously, you know, I'm studying psychedelics for my dissertation. I'm an advocate for recreational and spiritual psychedelic use and psychedelic therapies. And I feel like through these sorts of methodologies, but as well as through like meditation and even deep flow states in athletics that I've experienced, we can tap into the greater truth, which is that we are all one. We are all one organism. We're all one species. We're all, you know, we are one organism with the planet and one with the entire cosmos. There is no duality. There is no you versus me or you and me. And therefore my pursuit to get one over you or to make my position higher than yours, that pursuit is, it's an illusion, and it's a waste of time, because I'm just fighting against myself in this one unified field. You know, you're forcing things and power over things rather than, you know, more acceptance and compassion.
So how are you going to get this message across to Wall Street and Southern crackers?
Well, so far, well, I mean, hopefully Wall Street is starting to get on board with at least microdosing psychedelics because they see the benefits that it has for their work, and then hopefully that'll bridge the gap to higher dose sessions, which tend to sort of shatter your worldview and make you open up to these possibilities. In the South, that I don't know, but hopefully through more decriminalization, like which has happened in Denver around mushrooms, and decriminalization more nationwide, and you know, it's going to spread. And I think in your lifetime, definitely in my lifetime, this is what I'm devoting my life's work to, is going to be better drug policy, allowing people the freedom once again to be able to explore their consciousness, this one thing that we all human beings have as an innate right to do, and that is now currently restricted and prohibited. Those doorways are going to open up, and I think people are going to start taking advantage of their ability to explore their consciousness and find out these truths that we are all one, and stop with all the one-upsmanship between each other. We're just going to start seeing through that illusion again, and getting more in line with, like you said, with Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist theory that is way advanced, way beyond where we are right now.
So let me ask you a question, man. If you were to look at people in 1750 or 1850 or 1950 and look at people today, do you feel like we've progressed more towards what you're talking about or further away from it?
Probably further away. I mean, I think originally as human beings, we were more centered around religions like paganism and connection and natural spirituality that had like this unifying connecting principle. And now we've transitioned out of that into this more divisive, you know, this is my religion, this is your religion. We have clear boundaries, and I think we need to shift back into the old world views of you know, the underlying unifying concepts that are in all religions. The stories are just different, you know? We just need to drop the stories and find that underlying unifying principle.
You see, I believe that we've moved closer to what you're talking about than further away than we were in 1750.
That's good.
In 1750, they would have put you in a basket and stabbed you to death with a pitchfork.
True.
Right? In that I would have had to just be like standing there and watch, because I don't want to go in a basket and be stabbed with pitchforks. So when you take those hard-lined ideologies from back in the old days, because we're talking the Muslims will kill you for not being Muslim, the Christians will kill you for not being Christian, right? And you had these hard-lined rulers. Even here in America, you had staunch 1750, man. You had staunch rules. You couldn't just open up a business back in those days. You had to go through a very strict apprenticeship, and it had to be signed off by local leaders. The Blair Witch trials were because of fungus, a psychedelic fungus on rye bread.
You mean the Salem witch trials?
Salem, yes. And they killed, what did I say?
You said the Blair Witch trials.
Blair Witch. Yeah. Those things. Yeah, the Salem's, that was crazy that they didn't even have rationalization in those days. They didn't have any information, right? And I think what's making a big change, and less people are dying now. More people are getting medical care than ever. More people are coming out of poverty than ever before in human history. Free markets have pulled parts of Africa out of poverty that would have never seen it. And we got to get rid of some of their governments that are, I think what holds Africa down is their governing systems. And that's just my opinion piece there. I think taking away 100% of the money from people that earn it is bad. So I really believe that the world is on this track that everybody's screaming it should go to. And I think they're doing pretty good when you're looking at where people were in the 1940s and 1950s with all these topics. And now they're not even topics that really should be brought up anymore. Like 1950s, a black guy jumping in a swimming pool been a big deal. Happens all the time now. Nobody cares. We don't care, right? So we've grown and we've become more accepting. Even talking about the crackers down south. And do you understand what I mean by crackers?
I think so, but maybe you should explain it to the audience who might not know. Maybe I don't know.
So cracker is a slight derogatory term for Northern Gaelic people. All right, honky is a Hungarian factory worker. Cracker is a group of people that moved into that southern area. They were called crackers in Europe, and I think it's because they were cracking wise back in the old days. Shakespeare actually mentioned cracker in one of his plays. We know it's an old term that kind of just collectively gathers these hard-headed people. And governors in Florida would tell the crackers not to go into certain swamp areas and build houses. And he said, and then he was like, man, that they would move right into where you told them not to move, and they'd start building a cabin, and you go in and try to say, listen, we need you to move up here where it's not a flood zone, and then they'll fight you to the death over it, so you got to let them just die. It was a particular group of hard-headed people that were crackers, and you're dealing with the descendants of them, and when you're down south. But here's my point. Is the South more racist now than it was in 1750?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't live down there.
No, it must be much less racist than it was in 1750.
That's true. I mean, it must be, because there's people in the South, people of color in the South coming into prominent, political positions and mayoral positions and influencers. There's still definitely aspects of racism all over the country.
If it's going to be someplace, it is down there, but it is less than what it was.
So you're saying in general, the tribalism, and not just racial tribalism, but tribalism in general, people really sticking to their guns has reduced, and that we are unifying more.
Say that again. I think the tribalism has slightly reduced. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then, what are some of the benefits? Because I still read a lot of current contemporary literature about that the tribalism does still exist in most parts of the world and most cities, and it's across scales from tribalism between families to tribalism in communities, between states, between countries, things like that. And there has definitely been some benefits to adopting a tribalist orientation across history, or else we wouldn't have used it this long. But now, like you said, you're seeing this decrease in tribalism in general. So what are some of the benefits that can come from the reduction in tribalism? And what are some of the benefits of tribalism that we might have to consider giving up in order to move forward into a more unity-based society?
Man, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So I think that we've not been here before in too many civilizations. If we've been this place before in human civilization, I don't know about it. tribalism, for example, built the Library of Alexandria at one time. Now, tribalism also burnt the Library of Alexandria, right? And for those people that don't know, early Christians burnt the Library of Alexandria, and Christians will say that that's not true, but I really believe it is. And they burnt with it all of human history that we had recorded and stored in the Library of Alexandria, which I think was a tremendous amount of information. And these types of acts of tribalism probably were stepping stones to put us into the Dark Ages. But it was also tribalism that pulls us out. Christianity played a massive role, for example, tribal organization, in feeding people in the Dark Ages so they could live, right? So they did, some of the groups of Christianity did amazing good. Some did amazing bad. But I don't know if we're going to break free of tribalism, in my opinion, because we don't have a single direction to head. And the only messages that are being sent out there is, hey, give me free stuff. And that's not real motivating for most people. I didn't get free stuff, right? I didn't go to college for free. Not at all. My kids aren't going to go to college for free, and I'm going to pay for their education.
Right. So then what do you teach your kids? I mean, your kids are growing up in a society that is telling them at every twist and turn, support free things, support all these liberal agendas and all these different things that you need to be careful of. You know, your sons might in their lifetime have to sign a contract of consent to go on a date with a woman and give her a kiss. You know, some of these things are getting a little ridiculous. How do you teach and inform your boys amidst this culture that is pounding them with all these propagandist messages?
So first on the dating thing, what I told my kids I want to see a text confirmation from a girl. I want to see a saved voicemail confirmation from a girl. I want to see an email confirmation from a girl. And I want to meet the girl. And I want to be able to give character judgment on this person. And I have absolutely said no to one of the girls that came with one of my boys. She stepped out of the car, and I turned around and looked at her through the window, and I just said, no, this is done. And he said, why? I'm going to give it one more chance. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to look at her mother. She's missing teeth. We're done. And I did. Went out, looked at her mom. She was missing 4 or 5 teeth. And we're done. And then it turned out that family had significant drug use issues that I disapprove of, opium, things like that, opiates. So as an active parent, it's my job to make sure that my kids don't drown, metaphorically, or in water. So I have to teach them my best knowledge of how to swim and let them know you can find people that know how to swim better than me. Maybe one day you'll know how to swim better than me, and I hope you do. But for right now, when you're dealing with women, this isn't going to be a very popular opinion. I look at women as adult children, and you have to take special precautions with them. And when you're dealing with women, you have to take a lot of precautions with them. Young boys are...
Maybe just
go ahead.
Clarify that just a little bit. Like, what do you mean by just the first part, that women are adult children, not the second part about dealing with women, adult children?
Well, if we're going to negotiate for hostages, who are we going to negotiate for?
For the women and children.
Why?
Because they're of greater reproductive value, maybe?
Okay. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know either.
I know why the children. But children can't defend themselves. And women can't defend themselves as well as men. right? So if somebody were to, if an adult man went up and shoved your wife, what would you do?
Yeah, I would handle it.
Yeah, you would detonate. Yeah, entirely.
Or I would just allow her to do it because she handles my light work and she's trained to.
Well, if a full-grown man pushes her as hard as he can, it could break her neck. So
yeah, true.
I'm sure that you would take action, and I think that it would be much like you would take action if you watched the same thing as a full-grown man walk up and shove a child.
Yep.
And now, what if a full-grown man walked up and shoved me? What would you do?
I would laugh and pull out my phone to start videotaping it.
Right.
It's about to be a Sully beatdown.
So this is, and I don't mean anything derogatory by saying that they're adult children. I don't know that we can work with them like in jobs very well. I don't think that the information that we're getting socially says that we can. I really, with all the lawsuits and everybody, the Me Too and all this kind of stuff, and then finding out how many of these things are fake, and then they just ruin some guy's life. Well, I'm here for the guy's life that got ruined. Man, if you're doing bad things to people, bad things should happen to you. But if you were dumb enough to try to get a movie part to watch some old gross guy take a shower, I don't know if I have any empathy for you. But we have these massive double standards to boys and girls, and children throw fits, right? They can throw fits. There's very little consequence. Maybe go to your room, right? But you're not going to do anything major to them. If a man throws a fit and starts, damaging a car in the front yard, the police are going to show up and have a knee in his back before long. If a woman does the same thing, usually it's just recorded and is good entertainment. And I think it's a soft bigotry of lowered expectations that creates this, but that's kind of how I perceive women. I mean, I don't know how to fight with them. I don't know how to argue with them. I don't know how to be in a relationship with them. The model keeps changing. I didn't alter with the model. I'm never going to be a good woman, and they're never going to be a good man in my head. So we've got a problem, and because of that, I remain single forever. And I'm good with that. But I look at them as a real potential danger, just like children. Like, I have to be very cautious with children in the gym, and I have to be very cautious with women in the gym. And guys, it's funny kind of when they hurt themselves. So it completely different standards and methodologies on how things are approached.
Yeah, I absolutely see your points for sure.
Yeah, and so I just mostly avoid them. And I know that sounds weird, and I don't mean that in a sexual way. I just avoid them.
Well, it certainly is a challenge to take that on for yourself. I mean, I'm speaking from somebody who's married. I mean, it was something voluntary that I knew I was going into, and it was going to alter the way that my lifestyle is going to be, and the way that I can't just necessarily do all the things that I want to do because it's different. You're
right. I agree. You're a single person now, but there's double standards between the two of you.
Yeah, for sure. And we try to ourselves try and reduce those and create equality as best we can, but still, even with our best efforts, society puts that on us anyway. When we go out, they still expect certain behaviors and certain things to happen. They expect me to hold the door open. If I don't hold the door open, and I'm joking with my wife and I say, no, you hold the door open this time, or I say, oh, she's getting the bill, and people give me weird looks. That's because, she and I have our own system of how do we not only equalize responsibility, but how do we create this atmosphere where we both feel equally, those two halves to that one whole individual.
Yeah, so I get your plight, and I've never felt there needed to be equality in a relationship that I was in. There's definitely different expectations. Like, if it's freezing cold out, I shouldn't sit in the house, and this is what I put upon myself, and I put it upon other males too. I shouldn't sit in the house and watch her scrape the ice off her windows. Right? I mean, she shouldn't be out shoveling the ice or shoveling snow while I'm in the house. Heavy lifting, right? That's mine. Burglar in the house. I got that. I have very old school thoughts in my head about relationships. And, what's interesting about this is this new model of feminism, and it is interesting to me because women didn't used to, prior to the Victorian era, they didn't used to be stay-at-home wives prior to that. They had to go to work like everybody else. And they had to do hard stuff. So it was in the Victorian era that it seems that we started altering, and women were like, listen, I don't want to go out to the barn anymore. And they started working to stay in the house and make sure that the house looked a certain way. And that's the way society, they created their society at that time. And then once they got tired of that, there was this movement of we went out of the house. And I think there's going to be a movement of we went back into the house soon. I think that we're going to do I'm seeing a lot of women saying, I don't want anything to do with this feminism thing. I want to find somebody that I can just lean on and I can support. And that's the model, Shane, that would work better for me. But not for everybody. I think it's going to be an interesting thing as you talk about, you're trying to figure out what your culture is. I'm not confused about my culture, and nobody fits it anymore.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's another thing that I really enjoy about you is, and I'm gonna say it, but I hope you take this in the right way. You definitely have like this old-timey sense of like honor and class, and you bring it to your martial arts and to how you raise your kids, and it's old school values. I think you mentioned the old styles, and this leads me into something, kind of a segue into a whole different topic. I hope you're okay with that in the last 30 minutes that we have.
Yeah.
And you recently did a podcast or a video about getting serious about training, and I wanted to talk to you about that. I haven't seen the video myself, but it's something that I'm constantly thinking about and battling in my head. The seriousness of training. How serious should I take it? How serious am I taking it? All these things. But how I'm linking this together is that you also bring this old school style of training a lot into what you put into your athletes. I can certainly remember times in fuse box way back in the day where you would have us holding classic like karate style positions, like horse stance or something, and going into our mental spaces while you walk around and like beat our shins and arms with these wooden sticks and things to, build up not only physical strength, but strength of mind and things like that, and using those old styles of conditioning for the mind and the body. Can you weave all that together with what you're talking about with getting serious with training?
So what I did to you guys in those days, I wanted to make sure that when you went out to instruct your own classes, because that's what was going to happen, I didn't want it to be this mindless repeat of motions. I wanted there to be some thought behind why we're doing something. And so have you seen like a kung fu stance? They have their hands up in the air or something, it's like, some kind of stance that it wouldn't make sense for today.
Some kind of blocking motion.
Yeah, they're doing something like, like this, like that. Like this doesn't make sense unless they have a shield in their left hand and they have a hammer or something in the right.
Or a spear, something back here. Yeah.
Yeah, so if their hand's doing this, it represents spear, it represents knife, it represents a sword, it represents a hammer, right? So I don't think that those hands they were actually like, hey, go hit somebody like this and break your hand. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think that it was the Ready Active Reserve in China, for example, at one time, and they have to go through their what we call kata motions, so their front line would move on the same whistle or flag and make a forward motion, because if a line breaks on a shield wall, that's a significant issue. So I think a lot of the martial arts were Ready Active Reserve stuff, and it got put into civilian use. And so there was some stuff that I weeded out, like stances that didn't make sense. Like, this stance doesn't make sense if you don't have an iron helmet on and a shield and a hammer or something. But in the time that they did this, it made sense that they would do that, because I ended up doing, when I fought for the ACL, I ended up doing those things exactly the same way. And all of our stuff that we do today didn't work in armor. All right. So there's an appropriation of information that I think is incredibly important. And I can't know the future, so I better know the past. And so I tried real hard. What's that?
This guy talked a lot about appropriating different martial arts to make something more effective and weeding out the stuff. This is my favorite picture of Bruce Lee with that mustache. Check him out. He's a badass.
Yeah, love Bruce. And coming from the Ed Parker Kempo system, Bruce Lee had some input on that. So I probably am not responsible for my own ideas of openness in the martial arts. I'm sure it was influenced by him. What I put in there with those old traditional motions, I wanted there to be something more spiritual than just, we're going to kick pads until we all have arthritis.
We did that too. But.
We did, yeah, boy. So I've toned the program down a lot since then. I don't know that the people today would be willing to take that program. That program was pretty rough. But the idea is to give people a sense of tradition inside of what they're doing, so modern ego, like present time ego, doesn't become the only thing that's being worked here. And I think you and I both saw people's egos, mine, other people's, get out of control when we lost that sense of tradition and spirituality, that we're basically just governing laws that we agreed to kind of follow. Because when you pull humans off of a leash completely, they tend to do bad things. Not evil, just not maybe good. So the use of the old ways for me, I think that the way forward on this planet needs to maybe take a few steps back in time. I have lights on in this house right now, and normally I don't, and I don't mean to sound creepy, but when it's dark, for me, it's dark. And I leave it that way so my biological clock can click right, and I retain my ability to see at night with night vision, as people are starting to lose their night vision because they're never in the dark. So I don't use very much light at night, and where I came from in Montana, we just didn't use a lot of light. We were still using gas oil lamps for quite some time throughout my youth. And I loved it. I absolutely adored it, and there's something special to it. I don't think that I need a particularly huge amount of technology to survive in this world, so I tend to roll. I had to make a decision, Shane, and this goes down to success a little bit too. I have 25 or so years left. I have to double down on what I know. Now's not a good time for me to change and become something else and go to college and run up $100,000 in debt and try to go out and become something that I'm going to die before I get it to take off. So now's the time for me to double down on what I know. And what I know comes from a much earlier time. I always thought I was going to be the cutting edge guy, but I'm really not. What I am is a hold on of the traditions of the past. And I got through a hand of fortune or misfortune, however you consider it, taught very old ways by my family. And that comes from woodworking to living daily life.
Right, and like the ancient ways, not only of your own heritage, but I think you expose us to the ancient ways and the ancient philosophies of different warrior classes, from samurai to Greek warriors to Roman warriors to ninja. Teaching us through those kind of old style exercises, which I've never been to another martial arts school, and I've been to a lot. I've never been to another one that embraces those old styles. And I tell you what, from my perspective, it made everything so much more interesting. I knew that there was benefits happening. I knew that my bones were strengthening every time that you hit that. I knew it was increasing my mental toughness and my ability to stay mindfully in control of my mind. As somebody kind of whacks away at your frame. So I saw the value in it, and I definitely, now I am an instructor. I teach at Z's, once a week, and I try and integrate a lot. Actually, a lot of my style, a lot of my curriculum is directly from the things that you taught us in the early Fusebox days. Mental toughness, and sitting down with the team and talking about what it really means. What am I really teaching you to do? What are the applications, not only in the gym or in a sporting context, but on the street? When does this move that I'm teaching you going to work in the tournament, but definitely not to try this in a bar with somebody? So all those things that you brought to my experience, I now get to pass on to others.
So yeah, I think that's, I love to hear that. And I thank you for that compliment. I think it's important that we be mindful of what we teach people, because they're going to believe you. Mm-hmm. And if you violate that trust, it's a significant sin in my mind. And I get so upset with people that teach knife fighting sometimes, because what they teach is unlikely that anybody could possibly ever master that. And to allow that one person to think that they're going to defend themselves against a knife attack doing something significantly complex inside of the irrational movement of a potential killer is irresponsible to me. I think that people, as far as the old ways, maybe should take more spirituality or more seriously their role when they say things and they have the power to make people believe them. That perhaps if you have an opinion, you need to state that it's an opinion and not a fact. And I try to be pretty clear about this stuff. Is like, that's why I said this is an opinion piece, right? I don't know the facts to everything that we're talking about. I can only really see how the world bangs off of me and how it bounces off of my children and how I perceive it bangs off of you from how you explain it to me. And I see how people react to me with my older, hard-lined internal rules about how things I believe they would work better. And I think that people should take themselves, if they're going to take themselves more seriously, they should take themselves, their words, with the responsibility that the other person may believe them and act upon them. And that's a sacred task, I believe.
Absolutely. One of the most, well, it's a Buddhist saying, but I actually have it tattooed in Sanskrit right here on my collarbone, and it says, enlightenment of body, speech, and mind. And that was one of the major tenets that the Buddha taught about, is having that complete authenticity and truthfulness in everything you say, everything you do, being completely honorable and not trying to slight anybody, not stealing. Everything you say, do, and What was the other one? Body, speech, and mind. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an important task, but I think that now we can just say things and not have them held accountable because we live in such large groups of people that you can just, if people don't trust you, you can just transfer yourself to another group. I didn't grow up like that in the small village where I came from. I mean, if you ruined the authenticity of your words, they're done. I don't even know if you can ever recover.
Yeah, I mean, you ostracize yourself, and that should be a natural consequence of, lying to the group, is that there are consequences instead of just being able to jump ship and go find another tribe so easily.
Right.
So getting back to my initial question on this, getting serious about training, what are the major components about that, and what might you say to someone like myself who, like I said, I've struggled throughout my martial arts career to either put as serious effort as I feel I should into my martial arts, or to back off and kind of say, I'm taking myself way too seriously. I just need to have fun here. What are your thoughts? You've been doing this a lot longer than I have.
So there's a Greek saying, and I'm probably going to botch this a little bit, but it's I use it regularly, and I probably botch it regularly. Out of 100 men, 10 should not be there. In the Army, 10 are just targets. 80 make the Army. We're glad to have them. We wouldn't have an Army without them. 9 are fighters. And we couldn't do this without those 9 fighters. But 1 is a warrior. And I've had people say to me, even recently, I bet you would be the warrior, coach. And my response is, when I was born, for many years, I was one of the 10 that shouldn't be there. And then by the grace of God or whatever, I grew into the 80 that made the Army. And then with any luck, I grew into a fighter. And if I could survive that, maybe for a short period of time in my early 20s, I became a warrior. And then I aged back down to becoming a fighter, and then back into the 80. And then I turned I haven't gone back there yet, but I'll be there before long, where I'm back into that 10% that shouldn't be there. So taking it seriously comes down to a very finite time period you have in your life. I keep mentioning to you that I have 25 years left because I believe that's what I have. And I'm okay with those numbers. But a person that walks into the gym at 17, 18, 19 years old feels like they have an eternity, and they don't. They don't even heal properly after 21. So you have this short period of time that you need to learn all the information you can without getting seriously hurt, so you can have the expertise when your body matures to its peak performance level, which is well after 21, when you're closer to 27. Now, inside of there, with different people's maturity levels, what are we going to do to get enough information in without boring them to where they hear whispers in their ear from other people telling them that they have a shortcut to success without losing those potential warriors? So we have had people come into the gym well past their prime talking about wanting to become warriors. And it's difficult to look at a 35-year-old man and say, okay, you're going to be a warrior. You can be a fighter, but his prime is done. It's going to take me too long to get the information in. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but on one sense, like, warriorship is not just one's physical ability. I mean, that's definitely a big part. One's current physical ability and level of training and level of cardio in order to enact your will over someone else is a part of being a warrior. But I believe that once you find the philosophy and adopt the warrior philosophy into your own life, I mean, not once a warrior, always a warrior, because people certainly can go backwards and go back into old behaviors. But for me, anyway, I feel like I've adopted a warrior philosophy, and I may not ever be some champion fighter or some gladiator, but I feel truly in my heart that I am a warrior, in that I take those ideals and those virtues into my everyday interactions, into my quality of my research, into the quality of my work, into the work ethic that I put towards school and relationships, and all that stuff is components of being a warrior. But I see your point too, that warriorship does have this component of physical, tactical readiness and ability.
When I'm talking about warrior, I'm talking about warriors in my head are looking for a problem. I'm not a warrior. Somebody else told me one time, he goes, "Well, man, if you were back in the Viking day, you'd be a crazy warrior." And I'm like, I don't think so. Warriors are looking for an issue, and I don't see my personality floating across the ocean and doing that to people. So,
what about a warrior monk?
I'd be a good shipbuilder.
Yeah.
I don't know if you should go into the shipyard picking shit with people, but if you did it in a modern shipyard, you'd get beat up pretty bad. These are rough people, but they're not overly focused on the warrior part, and neither am I now at this age. But I'm capable of being one if I'm pressed. But what I'm talking about is taking training seriously and making somebody cage or ring ready. And they come in at 35 years old, delusional about their age. So we're not going to get you into the UFC most likely, unless there's this stroke of just physical luck. But you can do some pretty amazing things that you couldn't have done otherwise. If you take it seriously, if you train intelligently, if you allow your body to heal, if you don't abuse yourself. There's so many things to this. And what I find that most people are really looking for is the instant gratification from a low-level sense of praising from friends or individuals around them versus the actual journey of the fighter.
So people are seeking more, like you said, the accolades from others, taking like this outward approach for validation rather than being validated by the experience itself, the struggle, the challenge, and the overcoming of the struggle and what that feels like. That's what conceptualizes, a warrior, is that the warrior's in it for the experience, not for the glory per se, even though some warriors over time have been in it for the glory.
Yeah. I find that a lot of actual fighters are glory hounds, and something's going to drive you. I'm an egotistical lifter, Shane. I lift for ego. I'm not trying to set a world record. I just don't want to hate what I see when I get out of the shower. And whatever drives an individual is fine with me. But why would you want to put yourself through the rigors of becoming an actual fighter, an actual warrior, when you already have an established friend group that is a group of incredibly successful low achievers, when you can just train and do 2-3 fights at a bar and become a local hero inside of that group, right? You can get lost in your own mind, thinking that something happened that didn't happen, that you became a celebrity in your own mind amongst these people. And you get introduced at the bar, right, as a fighter. The guy's a fighter. And then other drunks are like, wow, he's a fighter, and then everybody, and that's where I lose most people. So when we're talking about taking fighting seriously, we're talking about a very deep lifestyle. Like you can't correct me if I'm wrong. You don't become a doctor on an hour 3 hours a week, right?
No. It consumes almost every free second of my life, if that even exists anymore.
Right. So to become a professional fighter, to make it to the highest levels of warriorism in the modern gladiatorial arena, it's going to require no less dedication. Do you agree?
I agree.
That's where we lose them, right there. How many people become doctors?
Not very many.
About the same amount of people that become fighters, maybe. It's not easy, right? There's easier ways. I break it down like this. The unsuccessful fail less than the very successful people. The unsuccessful only fail one time. And there's a name for the time that they fail, and it's called life. They're just failing at life in order to have this perception of safety, or this perception of security, or this perception of acceptance. As where the successful, however you define that, oftentimes have taken great leaps and jumped from the nest and had to learn to fly. Most people won't do this, and I can't talk them into it. If they don't come wired like that, I can't talk them into it.
Yeah. Well, at least, you're doing your part to share with people and at least help other people examine themselves and their own expectations and put things into perspective. I really appreciate that. So one last thing, though, before I let you go, and I want to thank you again for coming on the show today. It's been awesome. We've traversed a lot of topics, and I think the listeners are getting just as much out of this as I am personally. I'm getting a lot out of this. I always love our conversations. But that is that you mentioned the the ACL, the Armored Combat League.
Yes.
So this is something that a lot of people don't know about, but you were a participant in, getting in all the armor, all the traditional armor, and going to battle with others who are willing participants. I bring that up only because you mentioned it earlier, and because Callie and I just went to a wedding down in Florida, and the groom was also an armored combat fighter. Takes it extremely seriously. We got to sleep on his couch, and I'm sleeping on his couch in his living room, and I'm surrounded by all these Viking axes and swords and things hung up on the wall, and it's really cool. I really felt that vibe in there, and but he had, all his groomsmen were of his clan, and they all compete in the Armored Combat League. And I didn't know. I wanted to ask you, how big is that league? Is it possible that you could have run into them maybe at one of your competitions? I know that a lot of people don't know that these things happen. I think when they hear about it, they think of LARPing and going out there and hitting each other with like rubber swords. But no, this is live action, heavy metal on metal, and it's hard work.
Yeah. So I don't know if I would have ran across him or not. I've competed in Colorado and California, and I was really in it just to kind of see what those men would have experienced in those days of fighting that way. And it taught me a lot about history and the way people perceive these ancient injuries that they pull from bone structures that we find in the ground. I think archaeologists have a lot of a little bit of like fantasism in the way that these injuries occurred. And it's okay. We can see that the injuries to the skull, for example, occurred, but archaeologists are saying that maybe it was a swing upward that did it. And I'm telling you right now, nobody swings up in armor. You're in a hurry, and there's too much vulnerability to dropping your hand. So everything's kind of stays up like this. And everything slaps down. So if there was an impact in the head that went up like this, it means that the person fell forward and somebody hit him on the down. But an archaeologist wouldn't know that because they probably hadn't put on the armor and been exposed to the limitations of our body. So it was an amazing time. I personally wouldn't want to get lost in it. It's expensive, and I find it incredibly valuable, the time that I spent with those guys, and I like them. Met a lot of really cool people, and but it's definitely not LARPing. It's pretty. I mean, I got knocked out a couple times. I mean, that should count.
Yeah, I mean, it seems brutal, and I can't even imagine. I mean, I know what it feels like to be in fighting shape for like an MMA fight or a jiu-jitsu match, where I'm not wearing any armor, but put on, you know, however many, if it's upwards of 100 or more pounds of armor, and try and move with that too. I mean, I was asking this guy, the groom, he was huge. He was like 6'4", 6'5". I hope to have him on the show soon. But I asked him, I said,
right.
yeah, I asked him, I was like, you must be in good shape to wear this armor. He says, yeah, pretty good shape. I was like, yeah, but could you run a mile in it? And he says, oh yeah, easy. And I was like, holy shit, man, this guy really must be, I mean, to be able to carry as much body weight as he carries and armor on top of that, and to be able to run a mile with ease, that's got to be an entirely different level of stress on the body and adaptation.
No, what that is a podcast of its own, putting the cameras on this guy and watching him run a mile in armor.
Yeah.
I want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
The armor is not that hard to move in, and my armor only weighed about 97 pounds, and I had a very heavy helmet, because the guy that made my helmet out of the wolf pack, he just wanted to give me kind of a juggernaut helmet so I can take hits without getting knocked over. And so he gave me my helmet weighed 15 pounds, I think. And so I could basically take a hit, and you have to hit at least hard enough to knock something that weighed 15 pounds off of a shelf to get to my neck muscles, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to take some pretty dang good hits and run in and have some fun, man. It was definitely a blast, but it takes a lot of money. I don't know if that guy's doing well financially, but you kind of have to afford to travel and all the armor, because your armor is only good for so many times. And the injuries, when they happen, are pretty. I got hurt for about a year out of one fight. So when they happen pretty extensively.
Pretty drastically, yeah.
Yeah, right. Got hit with an axe, right? So.
Right. All right, Sully. Well, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure, and hope to be on your show soon. That'd be really cool. And
yeah, I'd like to do that in person.
Yeah. So tell the audience just real quick what the name of your podcast is, how they can reach out to you if they want to know more about Fusebox, more about the podcast, other things like that.
Hey, so my podcast is the Viking of Vahalla Project podcast, and the Viking of Vahalla Project itself is kind of a male-centric organization that works with helping men kind of navigate this modern era of change that we're talking about. This organization kind of pushes people to really develop the strength in themselves to accomplish what they're trying to get accomplished in life. But we do it with a lot of the old ways, and while keeping one eye on the past, we try to keep one eye on the future to use modern Vikingism, which is we can't go out and conquer villages or anything of that nature anymore. And so we're looking into internet space and business and charity events and things of that nature that we use for that energy for. The podcast itself is going to range on a couple of different topics of fighting from the Fusebox facility. It's actually not called Fusebox anymore. It's called Sambo 1. From the Sambo 1 facility, and what it looks like to become a Sambo athlete, a Jiu-Jitsu athlete, a submission grappling athlete, to what it takes to just get in better shape and be more impressive to your wife. And I think that's a worthy goal in itself, is to remain interesting to your spouse. So if anybody wants to contact me, I can be texted directly at 720-207-3860. And I can be found at fusebox.com. I retained the old name, even though we changed the gym name, because it's more known. And that's FUSBOXE.com. And you can reach out to me either way. And my name's Michael Sullivan. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. So if there's anything I can do for anybody, and Shane, I'd love to have you onto the show, and we could kind of pick through and kind of talk about the old days, because you were a very aspiring athlete, and if it wasn't for your knees going out, I think you would have gone all the way.
I would love that, and I would love to talk about that too, because believe me, I mean, and you know this from being a fighter too, you know, I can't help but reminisce on the what ifs if you know, the knee stuff hadn't have happened to me back in 2007 or whatever. So would love to talk about what you saw as my potential, and I learn from you every time, man. Thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.